Martina, just unmute, please. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. It's a warm welcome from our side. I'm dialing in from Cape Town or the northern suburbs today to welcome you to this April webinar. As you know, we're preparing to get ready for the City Nature Challenge that kicks off tomorrow. So we're going to share today a couple of spatial tools with you so that you can hopefully maximize your citizen science data. My name is Martina Treurnicht. I'm the Conservation Project Manager for the Botanical Society. And just to set the scene a little bit today, we have three speakers, Kagiso Mogajane, Anisha Dayaram, and Hlengiwe Mtshali, and they will be taking us through a couple of spatial tools, as I've mentioned. Some of the tools you might be familiar with. It's based on the South African VegMap project led by SANBI, and then also the VegMap photo project on iNat, as well as the iNat integrated tools and projects that you can utilize for your citizen science data. A couple of announcements. I believe they've been posted in the chat, but you're welcome to ask questions to any speakers. We will be taking questions between some of the presentations as the time allows. Otherwise, we will ask our guest speakers to answer them in the chat for you. I think without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kagiso. So Kagiso is a vegetation intern with SANBI, the South African National Biodiversity Institute. Kagiso, you can switch on your camera and then we can have a look at what you would like to share with us today.
Good day, and thank you for the introduction, Martina, and thank you to all our guests here today. I am going to start sharing my presentation with you soon. Okay. Please let me know if you can see it from your side, Martina.
All perfect.
Right, thank you so much. The National Vegetation Map is under the VegMap project, which aims to capture the diversity of vegetation across South Africa. Our job at SANBI is to collect new information and use that to update costly mapped areas of the National Vegetation Map. And today, Anisha and I are going to take you through some of the tools that we use to collect this data. And we invite you to be part of the team who uses these tools. And also we thank those who are already contributing. And much of our data originates from a large network of contributors, which includes citizen science data collected through iNat. We welcome data across all biomes within the country. And this is because we curate data for the entire South Africa. Some of these examples include the seashore vegetation, the swamp forests, or the mangrove forests. Mapping of our ecosystem types is fundamental in decision-making in South Africa. And this is used in national and international processes. And it's also used in research and education. We have different methods of collecting data, and some of the maps have been based on satellite imagery, geology, and other proxy data. So much of the map remains to be verified on the ground, and this is where citizen science is incredibly helpful. But apart from the map, the citizen science project that we have developed will also help you collect and pass along data about the conditions of our ecosystems. So it's just like species are red listed, ecosystems are also red listed according to international standards. And understanding which parts of our ecosystems are impacted by alien species or other pressures will help us move into other criteria of the IUCN assessment. And we have incorporated citizen science data collection through our VegMap photo project on iNaturalist. The aim of this project is to curate a visual database of the various vegetation types that we have within South Africa. Now, this is the homepage of our project on iNaturalist. And you can see on the left side, it will show you the statistics of the project, how many observations have been made, and so forth. The map you see below is where there have been observations within the country, but we still have a lot of gaps. You can also check the members within the project, and we have an about section which shares what we aim to do with the project, and it also shares a link to the latest vegetation map. We have instructions also where we guide our users on how to use the project, and we have a video tutorial to show how to use the project and a step-by-step rating guide. When you scroll down under guide submissions, you will see 3 important links which will take you to our tools such as the Google Earth version of the map, which is incredibly helpful for identifying vegetation types when you are uploading your observations. We also share the map mobile app version and the instructions on how to get that into your cell phone. The project also shows the recent observations that have been made. To be able to access the Google Earth version, you will proceed to the link I just shared now, and it will take you to a Google Drive link, which you'll be able to download the Google Earth version of the map. Once you are done downloading and you have added it to your Google Earth, you will see the National Vegetation Map covering the entirety of South Africa with different colors. Each color represents a different vegetation type. You can zoom into the map and click on any vegetation type, and there will be a pop-up similar to this one. It will show you the vegetation type name at the top, followed by the code, the biome within where the vegetation is, and other important information. You can also use the search function at the top left to search an area, and Google Earth will direct you to a specific vegetation type within your interest. To be able to contribute to our project, you will need to have species name within a community or landscape image that you are sharing on the project. Now, this species can be any species that's within the image that you are sharing, or it can be the actual species with a landscape image that you are attaching those with. Now here, I'm going to again emphasize that the species name and the location data are important for our observations as with any other observation on iNaturalist. To be able to add onto iNaturalist on our project, you will need to navigate to projects and you will click on VegMap photo. Once you have done that, you can proceed to fields. Once you get to fields, there will be a list of fields that will appear. From this list, we have top 5 lists that are very important that we encourage all our users to fill. And these include the observed biotic and abiotic pressures, the ecological integrity, the image scale, the SA-Veg, which refers to the vegetation type, the terrestrial confirmation, which talks about whether the type you're seeing in the ground matches the one on the map, and the vegetation community that's within your image. The SA-Veg is quite complex as we have over 400 vegetation types within the country. So I'm going to take you through how you can use one of our tools, the Google Earth Map version, to help you add the field onto our project. You will need to click the location icon on your deck, and then this location detail will pop up where you will now be able to copy and paste your latitude and longitude onto Google Earth where you have opened the National Vegetation Map. And this is incredibly helpful because Google Earth will pin you directly to where your image was taken, and that will make it easy for you to identify the vegetation type. While it's still loading in the background, I like to share that this is the method I prefer because it can be daunting as a new user when you have to select through 400 vegetation types. So I find this very easy to work with. Now, as I've mentioned, you are going to be pinned exactly to where your image was taken. And then you have a choice whether to click on the pin itself, or you can select anywhere around the blue polygon as it is the same vegetation type. Once you click that, it will show you, as I mentioned earlier, the vegetation type name, the code, the biome that is within, the other information related to the vegetation type, and so forth. So once we have this relevant information, you can go back onto iNaturalist, go onto fields, proceed to SA Veg. When you get here, you can type in SA Veg, and then you can put fynbos so that it can restrict all the vegetation types into the fynbos file. And then you can select the specific vegetation type that you are working within, and then you will click Add. Once you've done that, you've done most of the work, because now you can easily go to other fields like the pressure, and you will select the one that's relevant, and you will proceed to the next field. The image scale refers to whether you are uploading only a species image, a community image, or a landscape image, or both. So you will select the field that's relevant in that, and then you will add it. And note that as you continue, you will see numbers going up at the top. The type confirmation will explain a little bit. It means that does the vegetation type match the one that's on the map. And then the community, you will need to give a brief description of the communities around where you've taken the image. And for the purpose of this video, I'm going to say this is the community of Vegelia, because there is Vegelia in the image that is shown on this example. So you can be as descriptive as you can. And once you finish doing that, you will see that you have covered 5 fields, and you can proceed to the next fields. And once you are done, you'll be able to click submit at the top right corner, and your observation will be added onto the project. And when you are in the field and working offline, and you have the mobile version of the vegetation map, this is how it will appear on your cell phone device, whether it's on your Android or your iOS device. You'll have NVM, the year, and you will say mobile, and then at the end, you will have CMF2. Now, once this file has been downloaded on either your downloads or any other folder that keeps all your files, you can then proceed to the KeriMap app. When you get to the KeriMap app, you will need to go to My Maps tab, and then you will see the same name that you saw on your phone will be reflected on KeriMap. Then you can open that file. It will appear exactly the same way as it did on Google Earth. You can perform the same functions such as zooming in. You can move to the left and right. You can click on any vegetation type and see the information related to it. And you can also close that tab. And you may be aware that at the bottom right, there's a location arrow, which you can click on, and it will direct you to exactly where you are on the ground. And you will know which vegetation type you're within. The plus and minus arrows are also helpful if you want ease of movement instead of using your fingers. And the KeriMap app is incredibly useful because it can work whether you have internet access or not. I have done sharing the tools, and after my talk, Anisha will take you through how iNaturalist data helps us improve our data sets. And over to you, Martina. Thank you.
Thank you, Kagiso. I think that's a really nice integration to show, members and volunteers the potential of their data and how their citizen science efforts can be really integrated also at a national level. And I like that you also said that, we have threatened species often that we assess, but ecosystems are, equally important, if not more. But I will reserve my own opinion rather. Thank you, Silvana. I see you've posted a link also to the VegMap team's tutorial. So just to say, if some of those steps that Kagiso explained were perhaps a little bit detailed and you'd like to refer to a tutorial, there's a link in the chat. And you're also very welcome to refer back to the webinar that will be available on the YouTube channel afterwards. So Kagiso, I think with that, I'm going to thank you for the moment. We'll see if there's any questions that arise as Anisha talks. So it's my pleasure to introduce Anisha Dayaram to you now. Anisha is a vegetation scientist working for SANBI, also the South African National Biodiversity Institute. Anisha and I were interns together long ago, so it's been an interesting journey. Anisha, happy to have you today and look forward to what you will share with us.
Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Martina. Yeah, I still remember the first day that we met. Yeah, and thanks, Kagiso, for a really nice intro into the VegMap project and the kinds of things we do. So let's make that full screen. So what I'm going to do now is Kagiso set the scene for the tools that you can use, and we really hope that you use them during the City Nature Challenge and then later in the year during the Great Southern BioBlitz. And I think it's often quite overwhelming when you really just want to take pictures of pretty flowers, and we're now asking you to take pictures of the landscape and fill in some of these fields. So I think what I want to just showcase is where this effort, which we really do appreciate, actually goes into and ends up in terms of the national data sets. So what do we actually do? So in the VegMap project, one of our big jobs is to refine those boundaries. So Kagiso mentioned that each color represents a different ecosystem type or vegetation type, which is used for planning and prioritization. So if we look at the two ecosystem types, so there's a purple one and a green one, and there's a boundary that goes between them. What we really want to do is make sure that that boundary is as correct as it can be. So if in reality on the ground, when you go to the field, you see that the boundary is actually more like the map on the right. Why does this matter? Why would we want to bother shifting the boundary? And one of the big reasons is that the vegetation map gets processed and gets used later on in things like EIA assessments. So if you are in the ecosystem type and it's mapped as the green area and somebody wants to develop at that spot, if the map is inaccurate and somebody puts a development there, the kinds of triggers that it will EAI specialists will have to use to do the assessment will have a much lower bar because that type is listed as least concern. Whereas if we have a more accurate boundary, actually the critically endangered criteria then gets triggered for an EIA process. And so it becomes incredibly useful for trying to inform those sorts of, and that's just one use. So one of the ways, we have a very small team at SANBI, and one of the ways we can increase our team is by inviting you in through iNaturalist. So one huge way in which we've used the data from iNat, and this is from the whole of iNat, not just from our project, is we've scraped iNaturalist to try and look for all of the species that have been recorded for each vegetation type. So if you look on screen, what we have is we've pulled in all the species information from the Vegetation Map book. But in that book, for each vegetation type, they were only able to list the dominant species or the endemic taxa, which means that for many vegetation types, like Bethelsdorp Bonveld, there's only about 15 to 20 species. And we know that's not the case. There's definitely more species in that type. So what we are able to do with iNaturalist is we're able to then go onto the project. And what we can do is we can go to the back end of iNat for our project. Sorry, not for our project, for the whole of iNat, and we can export all those observations. So that basically goes onto GBIF and downloads the information. We select the additional fields that Kagiso mentioned that we ask you to fill in, and this will become useful later.
Anisha, I'm going to ask you to put your camera off. It is breaking up the internet quite, so if we can save a bit of internet. Thank you. You can proceed.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks. So that, please stop me again if there's a problem. So that downloads an Excel spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet we can then use it has the latitude and longitude. So we have a locality at each for each observation, and we have the lists of species. We can then bring these species and the localities into GIS, and what we do then is we link each species and its locality back to a vegetation type. And once we do that, we are able to get a list of all the observations that were made within that type. We take out the species that have already been mentioned in the VegMap book, and then we add the additional taxa. So what that means now is when we go to our database of species for each type, we now have a much fuller, richer list that can be used for desktop analysis.
Martina, I think we lost her and it's internet.
We'll try and get Anisha back as quickly as possible. Sorry about that, everyone. And I think we might ask Anisha just to recap to the previous slide when we have her back online. Okay, so due to that minor technical issue, I think we will move into Hlengiwe's presentation. So Hlengiwe, you now a little bit earlier on in the program as we intended, but I hope you're ready. We'll give Hlengiwe a bit of time just to get ready, and then we'll go back to Anisha's presentation when we've got her back online. So just to introduce Hlengiwe, Hlengiwe is also working with the South African National Biodiversity Institute. There she is. Thank you, Hlengiwe. And she works under the Threatened Species Program as a red list scientist. And Hlengiwe was really going to tell us specifically about how citizen science can be valuable to update the red list assessments. It's a national tool. It's incredibly valuable. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the red list, but I will leave most of the details for Hlengiwe to go through, and then we'll try and go back to Anisha. Thank you, Hlengiwe. The floor is yours.
Just unmute, Hlengiwe.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am Hlengiwe, as Martina have introduced me. Before I get on to how the citizen scientist data contributes towards the updating of red list assessments, I want to just give a brief background as to what is red listing. For those that don't know what it is, it's going to be very short. So basically what IUCN red list is, it's a system that measures the species risk of extinction using the guidelines and standards that are provided by the IUCN. And for those that don't know what is IUCN, it stands for the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. So the system is basically commonly misunderstood as some sort of a conservation priority by a lot of people because they think it's deciding on setting which species needs conservation attention. But that's not the case. Basically, what it does, it helps us to answer questions on the likelihood of a species going extinct in the near future. So it does this by categorizing species from the lowest to the highest risk of extinction. And it has 3 categories of threats. And we also have a data deficient category where there isn't sufficient information to assess the species risk of extinction. And this is where the data that is collected by the citizen scientists feeds most into for us to be able to update those assessments. So in South Africa, we also have used or amended the system categories to highlight the species that are at low risk of extinction. Nevertheless, they are not of conservation concern, but they have a restricted range and endemic at a particular area, and they fall under a rare category. And then we have also split the data deficient into 2 categories. One, which is data deficient, insufficient information, which makes it for species that have insufficient information to assess the species risk of extinction. And then there's a DDT. That one is when a taxon needs a taxonomic revision and it has not been resolved. Basically, it has 5 criteria that you measure the data that is available or that you have you measure it against. And I'm not going to go through all the categories, but there are 5. But basically, the information that you need is mostly on the population, whether the population is declining, the size, the range, the distribution range where the species is found, or whether there are any other threats known to affect the species survival, as well as how abundant the species is, where it occurs. And also, you can also do a quantitative analysis using this data that I've just mentioned to estimate the extinction probability of the species. So what I would like us or you to do here is to keep these criteria in mind so that you will understand why I'm highlighting that, why we need them, the data that is collected by citizen scientists, and why we talk about the data that is required to be completed in the project for us to be able to complete this assessment. So basically what you do, you need all the available information data to assess the species risk of extinction. So getting on to the citizen scientist project that is was founded in 2003, the Custodians of Rare and Endangered Wildflowers program. This program was formed as a collaboration between the South African National Biodiversity Institute and the Botanical Society of South Africa. And it was inspired by the Protea Atlas project. It was formed or established because of the lack of data to complete red list assessments, and the data that is collected in this project includes the distribution data of species, the abundance, the threats, as well as the ecology of plants, where they are found and stuff like that. So this network has citizen scientists of about 1,000 so far, and they all assist us in collecting the data, and the data that they collect feeds into the red list assessments. So over the 20 years, the data that they've collected has helped to generate accurate spatial data, as well as the population trend for the red list assessments. Just to give an insight on how the data that is collected by the citizen scientists feeds into, as I've mentioned, it feeds into updating the red list assessments, as well as on land use decision in planning. And it also contributes to conserving and managing critical sites for threatened plants conservation, as well as in building awareness of threatened plants and habitats around South Africa. Not only does it do that, it also helps in monitoring the status of the species of conservation concern. So since the inception of CRU in 2003, there has been a mass increase in the number of plant records that are entering the red list database. It's not only feeding the red list database, but it goes into different projects within SANBI. And how one can contribute data to this red list project. You can either you can sign up by signing up in iNat list, or joining the projects, the 2 red list projects that were created by CRU if you are already on a natural list. So these projects were created to help submit observations of data to the red list team, data that is used to complete assessments for certain plants as well as the animals. So the first project that you see that's up on the screen is South Africa Red List of Plants and Animals. This is a collections project. It's an umbrella project which has sub-projects, and for each of the sub-projects, they list the red list categories. So you would also, after you've joined this project, you would also have to join the sub-projects. So if you join this project, and if you happen to post an observation of species that is listed under this sub-project, it will automatically appear on the observations in the project panel, and it will alert you that the species that you have observed or uploaded on iNat is of a conservation concern, or if there are any threat status on the species. It also helps notify the crew team that there's an observation of a type of conservation concern that has been observed. But that does not mean that the data that you've added under this umbrella project is sufficient enough for us to be able to complete the red list assessment. It's just an observation. Then the second project that one can join to contribute data to the red list team is the Red List Africa project. And this project is mainly focused on plants, and it was created to assist in collecting the data that is needed to complete the evaluations of the red list. So when you join this project, one thing I would like to emphasize is that you must remember to trust the administrators of the projects with the data that you post, especially for the species where data is hidden. Those are sensitive species. There is a list of sensitive species that have been uploaded on iNat. So when you make an observation and you find that it's a sensitive species, it automatically hides the coordinates, and nobody else can be able to see these coordinates. So if you take the project and you join this project and you trust the managers of this project, they will be able to extract this information to complete the assessments. And I want to also highlight that no one else can see these observations when you post them, and only for the managers that will be able to see it. So this is just to also make sure that the poachers don't get access to this sensitive data. An example that I found is of the species that I have observed in KwaZulu-Natal. And at the time when I posted this observation, I was not part of any of the projects. And now that I'm part of the projects and I've joined the project, it has now come to my attention that I need to add it to the red list project. And if you post an observation under and you have joined the umbrella project, as I've mentioned, it alerts you that you have posted an observation of a threatening plant. Then if it's of a threatening plant, then you need to also tag the red list project. And in this case, it was not tagged. So I want to show you how then I'll do this for this assessment, for this species or the observation. At the bottom of the first picture, there is a section where there are projects, and it lists all the projects that I've joined. And I haven't tagged this species. So for me to tag this species to the red list project, I would then have to search the Red List Africa project, and then I click on it at the bottom. And as soon as I click on it, it will open up this form and prompt me to add information that is required to complete the data that is required to feed into the red list. So the first three are the required fields, and the bottom two are just optional, but it also helps to also complete fill in information under these two, especially if you collect a specimen, or if you want to record a biome where the species occurs. This information is also feeding into the ecosystem, the red listing of the ecosystem. So it's also nice to know which species, where the species occur in the biome. And for you to be able to see a full video, Suvana is going to post a link on the chats with a step guide on how to join this project. And it shows you from the beginning until the end and how you post the observations. So as soon as you have after you've populated all this field, then you click on submit to the project, and then it saves the data that you have added. It's also okay to add information, because I know some people will just go in the field and do observations, and they don't get a chance to add all the information that is sufficient at the time. But as soon as they get home, it's fine that you can estimate or estimate the area where the species is found, put your estimate, and if possible, return to the site if you find that the species that you have observed is of conservation concern. I suggest that when you go out on field, you observe or look around for like the habitats, whether there are any threats in the area where you're making the observations. And although you don't need to add it for all the records that you add on iNat list, but it's important for those that are listed under the umbrella projects and are listed as of conservation concern. So I have come up with an example to show you how the iNaturalist data that is posted by the citizen scientist is used in updating the assessments. So this is the case study of an Aristia grande species that is found in KwaZulu-Natal near Hillcrest. It was basically known from a type collection that was made in 1800s. And in 2022, Craig Peter uploaded an observation on iNaturalist. And as I was going through the assessments, I realized that it has a recent observation. But because I didn't know this was the correct correct ID, I then had to ask the iridase specialist, Dr. John Manning, to confirm the identification. And as soon as he confirmed it, I then had to go through the IUCN red list processes to place it in the right category. So at the moment, it's known from a very small area. And if you look at the map above, it occurs in a very highly transformed area. It's probably it's found in the grassland patches that are left. And it is known from, thinking from one location because we suspect the other one that's type locality is extinct due to this high transformation. And we, at the moment, have no information around its population data. We then have recommended that monitoring should be established so that we can have a clear idea as to where we should put it under the category of threat. Already it's on the high category of threat, but it also helps to have the population data. So with this information that we have recently, we were able to infer a decline from this ongoing habitat loss and what has been lost in the past. And another study, second case study that I've come up with is of a species that was listed as near threatened in 2006 due to the possibility of being affected by the alien invasive plants. And it is found in the Cape Peninsula with a very, very restricted distribution. And at a time when it was listed, it was thought that maybe the alien invasive species is going to affect the species. But with the consistent efforts to clear the alien invasive species by the Working for Water program and SANBI, these have led to a widespread habitat restoration. And the efforts that has been done has allowed the fynbos to recover. And from the observations that we have seen on iNaturalist, which are over 100, we have inferred that the population now is locally common, and we do not think that it's declining, as well as the work that was done by the two programs to clear invasive. So now we think it's less concern. Just to recap on what I have went through, I just want to emphasize that the data that is collected by the citizen scientists plays a very significant role in the evaluation process of species that are listed on the red list. And it does not only assist in updating red list assessments, but it also contributes to reporting on the state of the biodiversity of South Africa. And it also influences the policy decision making. So I would like to encourage people to join this project on iNaturalist. As I have stated before, sometimes you may not recall all these details required for the Red List Africa project. It's okay that if you don't remember, you can estimate. You can always return to the site to monitor. However, I suggest that when you get to the site, you examine the site, record that information for later use, and identify the threats wherever you are in the field. With that being said, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you. Over to you, Martina.
Thank you, Hlengiwe. I think that was really comprehensive and showed people just how much can actually be leveraged from their citizen science data. So thank you very much for that. I haven't seen any questions, Hlengiwe, at this stage, but we'll keep an eye on the chat. Just a few more additional links that were posted by our audience. Thank you very much for the links to the Red List project. And I'm sure you can contact Hlengiwe also directly if you have any questions. So for the moment, due to our earlier technical difficulty, Anisha, we have you back online. So I think we're going to go into your presentation again. If I can ask Anisha, if you can perhaps go back to the slide just before this one. I don't know if you, or is this where this is where your video started, but your internet was breaking up a little bit, and I'm worried that people might have missed some of the context of getting here. Anisha?
Anisha, put off your camera. I think you are
here.
Yeah, you can put off your camera just to save internet, please.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I'm going to ask you to put your camera off, please. I think the internet is possibly still a problem.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you well. You can continue.
Okay. I've changed networks. Is this any clearer?
It looks like it's good. Thank you, Anisha.
Okay, cool. Martina, is this fine? Is this sort of area?
Yeah, I think where you showed, yeah, this was more or less it.
Okay, cool. Thanks. My apologies, everyone. I'm going to try and make up time. But basically what I was saying is that when you when we download the data, we're able to populate more of the species that you have recorded of iNat, and basically it allows us to then we can download the data, and then we get an Excel spreadsheet, and then it allows us to link the information from that spreadsheet to the database, and then we get an extended list of the taxa that we otherwise wouldn't have had in the National Vegetation Map. So another use that we have from iNat is, Kagiso mentioned that we have those fields, ecological integrity and felt condition. And those fields, they can be a bit of a pain because there's two of them that you fill in. But when we look at the image and we tie that field back to what you have recorded, it allows us to then do cool stuff with where we think the natural parts of the vegetation type can be. So there are two fields. Felt condition is an older field. Ecological integrity is a newer one. We don't want to delete felt condition because we'll lose all of the data we've already collected. So if you want to fill in one of those, please fill in ecological integrity. But just like the species, we can download the data from that same spreadsheet that we get from iNaturalist, and we can combine the fields. And basically what it allows us to do then is we can take that data and we can put it into GIS once again, because you've able to tell us that this part of the country is natural, this part of the country is degraded. And when we pull it into the GIS, basically what we're able to do is cool things with, this is, for example, the remnants layer for South Africa. So all of the yellow bits is where we have pulled in data that says these areas are natural. So when you zoom in, what the gaps show is that these areas are where some of the data sets are saying this area no longer represents the biodiversity for the country, Where the yellow areas are remaining, that's where we think there is still some biodiversity value. But this is all coming from land cover data sets, so satellite imagery and modeling, and we need people to verify whether that is actually true. So if we download your data, all the green bits are where they well utilized, or natural or semi-naturals, they still have a lot of biodiversity value. All the red bits are lost. And it's basically what you have told us on iNat. But the cool thing is we're able to then zoom into the spots and go and interrogate that information. So you'll see there's still a lot of area that needs to be verified. So although we've had lovely contributions, we need more from you to be able to fill in and verify the rest of this map. So for example, if we look at areas where there are gaps, if we zoom into the first one, you'll see in the attributes, it says you have told us that this is an area that is semi-natural. So it still has some biodiversity value, but it's been somewhat degraded. So that's very useful, but we wouldn't want to change this area to now a natural area because it is around houses. Whereas this area, when we look at it, it also says that it's semi-natural, but it says that it is degraded because of grazing. So when you put grazing animals, the felt still has many of the species, especially if the grazing pressure is not too high, it still has biodiversity value. So we wouldn't want to say that we have completely lost that patch of the vegetation type. And then when we go to the observation, we see that it's actually really lovely felt. And so your observation tells us, oh, maybe we need to rethink marking that area as a gap, and we need to bring it back into the area that we want to count as contributing to positively to that vegetation type. So this is really, really useful. We haven't made use of it properly yet because we don't have enough data from across the country. But for example, that granite low felt, we can now start increasing some of the patches and say, hey, this area is not perfect, a perfect representation of that type, but it is still really, really important. So that's the next use. What I want to show you next is the other field that Kagiso mentioned. So that's the vegetation community. This one, we don't always expect everyone to fill it in. It's not a mandatory field, but it describes what the vegetation looks like at a more detailed level below the vegetation type. So how useful is this? We're currently looking at mapping riparian areas across South Africa because we don't currently have a good map of where those are. And when I looked and downloaded the data, some wonderful people have contributed and written in, I'm in a riparian area. So I can use this now to give to the wetland team and we can work on this together. Another thing which is we have some very cynical people. So this person has put fictitious VegMap to track down Spirobolus imaginatus, which is basically a very cheeky way of saying your VegMap is wrong and you need to look at this. And then we have many other comments about this is in a transition area. This area that I'm standing in is most closely aligned to another vegetation type. And so it's basically verifying our vegetation map. Very, very useful because we won't be able to may never get to some of those places on the ground. So very funny to read some of those comments, sometimes a bit hurtful, but incredibly useful. And then something that has developed over the period that we've had VegMap Photo is that besides the national vegetation data sets, we also have been invited to contribute to international work sometimes. And this was a request a few years ago from the Global Vegetation Project team. And they said, oh, do you have pictures of your ecosystem types or your vegetation types? Because we want to build a global database of images so that people who haven't been to a landscape before can click on an area and visualize what it looks like. So we found all the good quality ones from iNat that are representative of a vegetation type, and we emailed our contributors and asked their permission, and we then submitted their images to the Global Vegetation Project. And the nice thing about them is they're very good at crediting the contributors. So we keep, it's an ongoing process because we don't yet have all our veg types represented. So again, please, when you're out bioblitzing or with the City Nature Challenge, please take more images because there's lots of gaps that we need to fill in. And then just the last one is the global ecosystem typology. The IUCN people also are looking to possibly build another database of images for all the ecosystem types on their website. And we would want to represent South African types. And our first place to look would now be iNaturalist. So we keep finding new uses for your one observation has been invaluable already, and then we keep finding more ways to use them. So it helps us improve our species list for each vegetation type. You act as validators for where areas may be degraded but still have biodiversity value. You also act as validators and make me laugh with your funny comments for whether the VegMap is wrong. You also help us find localities for special ecosystems like those riparian areas. And then you also, when you collect something, we now are able to have ready data for global processes and say, here's where we already have people contributing to us. So this is a huge thank you to those of you who are already contributing to our project. You can see how valuable that is. And for those of you who, I hope this encourages you to contribute to our project. Kagiso showed you where to go and find some guidance, but if you're still a bit confused, please feel free to email us because we really do appreciate the work that you put in. Thank you, and sorry for the technical glitches once again.
Thank you so much, Anisha. And no problem about the technical things. We definitely can't always predict it. So that was very insightful. I just want to remind our audience that if they have any additional questions for Anisha and Kagiso, you can contact them on that VegMap at sanbi.org.za. And then, Anisha, I think there's a question from Sandra that hasn't been answered that is directed to you. So are there guidelines for ecological integrity? That refers to, I believe, the classification that you explained a little bit towards the beginning of your presentation.
Yes, there are national guidelines. We try and put in brackets a slight description of what it is we think semi-natural and natural are, because we know those are not obvious terms. But I think thanks for that. What we can do is we can add a little note to the instructions and the guidelines to say this is a more expanded explanation of what those mean. So that's a good thing. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and it's also really nice that you highlighted the sort of global or international relevance of the data. I think that's really relevant in the times that we are in. I see there's a link to the carry map that you can download if anyone is interested in that. Potentially a really useful tool that you can use in the field on your mobile device, as Kagiso explained. And then I think, thank you, Kagiso and Hlengiwe, also for answering the remaining questions. I think we've settled most of them. And with that, I think I'm going to thank our speakers. Very grateful for your inputs and what you've shared with us today. We're hoping that for the audience, it will really help you to enjoy the City Nature Challenge that's coming up or kicking off very soon. Enjoy the 4 days in the field. For those of you that would still like to sign up to a project, I believe there's 31 projects currently on iNat that you can either register or sign up for. And there's our speakers again. Thank you very much, guys. We really appreciate the time that you spent with us. And yeah, we hope you get many questions and potential uses that we can all think of resolving for the audience. My last and final announcement refers to an upcoming event on the 14th of May. So there's a global initiative that's been announced. It's called the World Species Congress, and it's an initiative led by Reverse the Red. And so that's a global event taking place on the 15th of May. But we have a national or South African satellite event that will be online, and it's open to the public on the 14th of May. So I see, thank you, Madeleine, you've posted a comment also here in the chat or a link. Anyone is welcome to register through the link there. You can sign up through Zoom, and it should prompt you on your calendar to attend on the day. The event is hosted by SANBI and BotSoc and other conservation partners such as BirdLife, Endangered Wildlife Trust, also the Two Oceans Aquarium and the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. So we will be covering a range of talks. The program hasn't been finalized yet, but also it will go beyond plants. So we will be focusing on all taxa, and we hope it will be incredibly interesting and exciting for you to attend on that day. So enjoy the City Nature Challenge. We hope you make many exciting observations and that some of the tools we shared with you today were useful. I think that's it for tonight. And thank you again to our speakers, and thank you for joining us. Our next webinar will be the last Thursday in May, the 30th of May. So hope to see you then again, and do tune in for the next webinar. Thank you, folks. Have a good evening.